So welcome everyone to Be the Change Conversations with Visionary Women. My name is Tamara Herl and I'm CEO of Wild Divine Coaching Retreats. And I'm on a mission to help visionary women, those change makers who want to change society, those structures and things that aren't working so well anymore. I want to support them. And so I've been reaching out to visionary women around the globe who are doing that. They're changing things that aren't working so well. And so today I'm really excited to have Suzanne Jabour and Paige Park here. Both of these beautiful women are experts on grief and have very different approaches to helping people manage grief. So thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for having us.
You are so welcome. So the first thing I thought would be interesting for everyone to hear about is how you got started. What is your, well, let's talk about your project first. What is your program or project related to grief that you're working on? Suzanne, do you want to go first for this one?
Sure. So my current passion project I am working on is around how to support each other better. So I have two streams of that, one geared for individuals who just want to learn more. We're all so caught up in fear around grief. As a collective, we're so grief illiterate and grief phobic, and we're not talking about it. And then we're all scared, and then we don't know what to do or say. So we don't do anything. And it's just all a mess. So really helping people just to shift their mindsets and learn some skills. There are ways you can show up that are more helpful, depending on the griever, and just being really griever focused and doing what feels right for that person. I wish there was, I'm sure Paige feels the same way. I wish there was like one perfect thing I could teach you to say to every griever, but grief just doesn't work like that. So it's more about, you getting into a space where you can be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit emotional, and accessible to everything that's going on for them. So I do a version of that for individuals and communities. And then I have one that's geared for businesses. So I'll come into your business and help you either on a really practical level with what you can do to scaffold for people that have, symptoms like brain fog or sleeplessness or exhaustion, all that fun stuff that happens to grievers. So really practical scaffolding, and then also all the way through to sort of the level of systems change, where you want to really change the system and the culture in your workplace. And we can do all of that through supporting people in grief. And learning how to do that also helps us learn how to support everybody. So it's a big ripple effect when we can take that on.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
How
I'm
about you,
excited to
Paige?
hear what you're doing too. I love talking
Thank
to
you.
other
Yeah, me
people
too.
who work in this so needed area.
Definitely.
So we do. I have a very different, what's the word? Approach. That's the word. I have a very different approach. I actually use yoga, mindfulness, and meditation to help grievers learn to re-regulate their nervous system. So I do virtual and in-person classes and meditations that focus on nervous system regulation and finding that baseline for you, and then how to regulate back to that baseline when something happens, or when you have a grief moment, or when there's a trigger of some sort. And so learning, I teach a lot of tools and practical application things for how can we get back to this baseline? How can we, or find the new baseline? Some of it is even finding the new baseline. So how can we find our new baseline? And then once we get dysregulated, how can we regulate back?
That's awesome. I love that phrase baseline, and especially in creating a new baseline, because I think, when you lose your spouse or a child or any loved one, really, it's like you have to recreate your life over again. And so, creating or finding a new baseline makes a lot of sense.
I talked to a griever this weekend and she goes, I got to find my new normal.
Right, exactly.
So finding that new normal, that new baseline, that new space of what is life like now.
Yeah. So Paige, how did you get started? When did you have a vision of turning this work into a business?
Well, it actually came slowly. I'm a classroom teacher by day, and in a 6-year time span, I was a caregiver for both of my parents for 3 years. They both passed away. My mom after 9 months, my father 2 years later. And then 2 years after my dad passed away, my oldest brother passed away. And so I spent 6 years dealing, actually longer than that. It was probably more like 8 years dealing with the business of grief. So anticipatory grief, caring for elderly parents, taking care of all of the things that happen after somebody passes away. And I did all of that for about 8 years. And I was a hot mess. My system was shot. I was the first phone call when my parents were both ill and in and out of nursing facilities and rehabilitation facilities and all those different kinds of things. So I was very used to 12, 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock phone calls because something had happened. There was especially my dad, he was great at falling. The man was an expert. He was so good. He broke his clavicle. He was so good at falling. That's the hardest bone in the body to break, like, or one of the hardest bones in the body to break. Like he was gifted. He's also a brilliant, amazing human. So I say this with deep love and affection. And so there were lots of things that, happen as parents age and they have illnesses and things go on. And so I was a wreck, and yoga had been in my life previously. And it kind of did this weaving in and out, and yoga wove back into my life after the loss of my father. And I'm a classroom teacher by day. I teach high school, mild disabilities, special education, and I was seeing so much dysregulation within my students. I actually wanted to bring programs to the school. I still kind of want to do that, but also about a year after I did my yoga teacher training, a very good friend of mine, she is the reason I started doing this work, looked at me and said, "Paige, you need to teach grief yoga." And that was a little over a year ago. And as an experiment, I did 1 6-week class to see what happened in person. And now I have a virtual class, an in-person class, and 2 in-person classes. And then I do a virtual meditation as well, has been added into the schedule. And I love what I do. And it has kind of snowballed and blown into this crazy business that I have before me now.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks.
Suzanne, how did you make this into a business? What's your story of how your vision was born?
So I came to grief education after my most recent loss, which was the death of my son, Ben, in September of 2020 at age 22. And as you can imagine, that was a grief unlike any I had felt before. I had lost other people close to me. My dad died when I was in my 30s and my mom in my 40s. So it wasn't, I'm so grateful that it wasn't my first close loss, because there was something about that out of orderness that just kind of, for me, made it next level. And what I learned, really quickly as I kind of navigated my own loss and kind of found my own way, was that people didn't know how to support me, and people didn't know how to show up, and that there was this norm in grief conversations about grief changing your address book. And as I had more capacity myself, I was so fascinated by why we just accepted that, and why we just kind of were like, well, that's just how it is. Everyone scatters and no one knows how to support you. And then you make new friends that have had similar experiences, and on we all go. And I thought, well, that can't be the best we can do, right? Like, it's not that people intend to kind of disappear from your life. They just don't have the skills, and they don't know what mindsets they need to access or develop to be able to show up for you. So it's really become an important part of my work, other than helping grievers themselves, as a grief coach, find their path. But this idea that, we can show up for each other in a different way, and we can learn the skills. Like, this is all stuff we just need to learn. It's not something you have or don't have. We can learn it. We can help each other. We can open conversations. And so that's become really, for me, that's my cathedral project, is how do we normalize grief? How do we start talking about it? How do we, break down this kind of shared phobia that has us all kind of not wanting to touch it because we're so scared, but it's coming. We're all going to face it, for losses big and small. And especially right now with the cumulative impacts of our last 3 years, with the loss of people and our sense of normal and, jobs and businesses and graduations and, relationships, like we've had so much loss, compounded over this 3 years. And my worry is that in our rush back to normal, whatever that turns out to be next, that we're bypassing all of that. And that just then stays stuck with us, right? If you're thinking about it from your yoga perspective, like that's just all then stuck in the body. And that is no good for any of us, right? The science really shows us that stuck stuff, it is at some point likely going to go malignant and become physically harmful. So that's really become my mission is, how do we break that all down? How do we disrupt that? And that's sort of how I ended up with this kind of 6-step repeatable, customizable process that I can use with people no matter where they're at to help them start, to help them get going, to help them practice, find spaces to practice. Like I was not your good practice person, right? I'm a grieving out loud, bereaved mom. That should not be the first person you try and support, right? That's not a good starting spot unless you're brilliantly skilled. Or as I was so fortunate, I had a couple friends that were able to just say, I have no clue what I'm doing here, but I'm here for you and we're going to figure it out together, which was beautiful. They were able to be in the messy, in the muck, in all the great unknown of it all, which is really a lot about, especially that early part of grief. Because there is no perfect way. You can't fix it. We're all so enculturated to want to fix stuff, right? We're all A+ at that. Tell me your problem. Let's make a plan. Let's execute the plan. Problem solved. On we go, right? But grief doesn't work that way. Yeah. So we need a whole new set of skills. And that's sort of become what I'm here to open up for people and what I'm here to share what I've learned and help us learn together. Because we're going to all need to learn together because each time it's different. For each person, it's different. There's 8 billion of us on the planet. So that's like, 108 billion ways to grieve.
Yeah, definitely.
I love what you said about just let me be in the mess.
Yeah.
And that's so much of what I do is work at creating a space where if you're feeling messy and you just want to come be in your mess, come be in your mess.
Yeah.
If you want to curl up in the fetal position or child's pose for the entire class, but just be among people who get it, come do that. Being in the mess is such an important part of grief. And so many people try and make it better or fix it or think they're making it better, but actually end up making it worse.
Yeah. And it's hard for us, right? We don't want to be messy. We don't want to be uncomfortable. And that's where we need to get ourselves, is the place where we're okay with that, because that's what's required of all of us, the griever and the support people and the boss and everybody. We all just have to be all messy and uncomfortable.
Yes. And because grief is messy and uncomfortable.
Correct.
Definitely. And I love what you said about not being able to fix grief either. And we do, though, we want to, it's uncomfortable for us to see other people upset and grieving. So there's that natural tendency. But I feel like when we do that, when we try to fix it, it's like, in a way, it can be seen also as making the person feel like they don't want to make us uncomfortable. So then they might not express their grief fully, or B, they might think, oh, well, maybe I should be over this. Maybe. Yeah, which, we know that's not a good thing.
No, not at all. Because there's no timeline for it. And there's no end. Like once something has happened, it's there. It's always with you. And it never fully goes away. You learn to embrace it and you learn how to be with it in a different way, maybe a more effective way, so that it's not as out in the open and messy and crazy. And, every once in a while the mess will pop up, but it still pops up. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. It's always there. It's always with you.
Yeah. And I always say, my goal is integration. And there's so much trouble with the languaging we use around grief, right? You're supposed to get through it. You're supposed to move on. You're supposed to recover. I don't want any of those things, right?
No.
Because the subtext of that is I'm leaving my person behind. Well, I'm not leaving him behind. That doesn't make any sense at all. If we think about it logically, It doesn't make any sense. And you're so right, Tamara, like so much of what we say, those old cliches, like the subtext of them is, I am uncomfortable, so I would like you to be happy. Even though I'm saying like, well, your person would want you to be happy. No, I would like you to be happy because I am uncomfortable and I want you to be out of pain. But then all that says to the griever is, you're not a safe place for me to grieve.
Mhm.
And what grievers need the most is safe places to
Places to
grieve.
grieve.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift over to focusing a little bit about building this work that you do as a business. So Suzanne, we'll start with you. In building this grief work that you do as a business, what was the biggest challenge that you faced and how did you overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge for me anyway, well, partly for me, so I'm 2.5 years out from Ben's death. So for me, one of the challenges has been building capacity, my own capacity, as fast as I had ideas and as fast as I wanted to help people. So that's been a real challenge. And, you know, we need to disrupt that conversation and open up that conversation so that grievers feel like they can reach out, like what they're
Mhm.
experiencing is normal, right? So that's part of it too, is that grievers almost feel like they're supposed to be able to manage it and they're supposed to be able to do it alone, which of course is not correct. It's very normal to need support and to need a safe place to grieve when your friends and family don't have those skills. So I've really enjoyed places like podcasts to be able to say, no, like, let's open up this conversation. Let's start talking about it. You know, let's look at your company culture. If it's amazing, great, we can layer this on top. We can stretch ourselves a little further. If it's not amazing, because for the past 3 years as a business owner, all you've been able to do is pivot, and survive, that's totally acceptable and expected, right? But now we have a little bit of space to breathe, it feels like, till the next disruption comes. You know, let's look at what your company culture is like. Let's look about how you're supporting each other. Let's look at, you know, what your retention is. So really finding spaces where people are willing to have that conversation. For me, that's one of the hardest parts. And you know, my response to that is, I'm just going to keep talking until you hear me. And the people who are ready will hear it. So I take a lot of comfort in knowing, you know, my message is not for everybody. And that's okay. I had to really get myself there where it was like, I'm comfortable with grief. I'm comfortable talking about it. I'm comfortable sharing my story. That's not true for most people. So it's finding that way to kind of gently bring people into the conversation and not, you know, feel like I'm not offering anything prescriptive. I'm offering some ways to start, some conversations to have, you know, and for me, it's the ability that I have, which I think is the same with you, Paige, right? Like, come, this is a safe space.
Yeah.
Come here with your messiness and let's figure it out together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how about for you, Paige? What's been your biggest
I've
challenge
had
as a
a
business
couple
owner?
of I've had a couple of big challenges. One is people, like you said, who are just willing to come in and be in the mess and do the work and do the things and find the way to embrace. I've been told a handful of times, not enough to make me stop, but that my classes are a little intense and it kind of scares people off. But it is, like, we're talking about grief here. It's going to be a little intense. And I might be a little intense sometimes too in class. But again, a subject is intense, so I'm going to match the intensity of the subject. But I've also, like, just finding a place to be and to work in has been a challenge for me as well. Because I do classes, I do keep them small, no more than 6 people. Or 8 people, excuse me, no more than 8 people, just because I think once it gets bigger than that, it's just too much. So I'll add additional classes as we get bigger. But I'll find a space and then I'll lose the space and have to go find another space. So that's happened like 3 times now. Or 4 times now, where I've had a space and then I found a space and then they went, oh, I'm closing, or, oh, you can't do this here anymore. Or for one reason or another, I've had to relocate. Fortunately, this last time I had to relocate, it was honestly the very first place I talked to both times for both, because I lost my south side of Indy and my north side of Indy locations. It very quickly found another place to go and be in, which was really lovely. So hopefully these two will stick.
Yeah, I hope you can find a permanent home. That would be
Yeah, a
be
permanent
nice.
home would be delightful. It's not in the budget just yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
In the process of manifesting it.
Yes.
There you go. Well, speaking of that, Paige, how do you see your vision for your business unfolding?
I have really big plans. I'm launching this summer. I'll be launching a course that will be virtual, that will include yoga and meditation as tools to help grievers regulate, but also other things as well, utilizing ritual and other stuff in life to help support. And then eventually I want to have a retreat center where I offer not just daily classes or weekly classes, but also retreats for people to come and experience and grow and learn and be creative and find outlets to help envision and embrace their grief.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's so important to carve out that time to do the work. That makes sense. Well, those sound like beautiful visions. I'll look forward to seeing those manifest for you.
Thank you.
How about you, Suzanne? How do you see your vision unfolding and perhaps expanding in the future?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, because I'm really clear that mine is a cathedral project, right? Like it's a big enough project that it's not going to be done in my lifetime, because my goal is the normalization of grief. And it feels like we're so far away from there that I don't think we're going to get there in my lifetime. I would be so ecstatic if we did. So really for me, it's about, how far down the field can I kick this ball? Like how many bricks can I get us till we have the rose window? Like, so someone just has to put this top on. I don't know. So I really, my vision is that I am talking to big audiences, that I'm working with big companies, that people are the ripple of the needed structure, the system change to happen has started, and that momentum is coming. That's sort of for me where I'm aiming, is like, this is a cultural shift that we really all need to work on together. And it's wildly overdue, right? We're all carrying so much stuff. I think that's why we're lashing out at each other. And I think that's part of why we're seeing the isolation the way we're seeing it now, and the sort of us versus them. We're so fearful. So if I can shift that, from fear to more love, like it's one of the two. So we need to be choosing love more often. So for me, it's that big of a vision. Like it's about a culture shift and an opening of conversations that we're not having in as big a way as I can.
Nice. I love the bigness of that, and that you are committed to just doing as much as you can during your lifetime to normalize grief. Definitely something that needs to happen, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious, so the two of you, I'm just so grateful that you're doing this work, because I just think in my opinion, as a culture, we don't really know how to grieve. We don't know how to support those who are grieving as well. So I'm so grateful that you're doing the work. And there are other people that are seeing other things that need to be changed in society. So, thinking back to when you started, and if there's somebody who is going to listen to this replay, and they've got, a passion, and they see something that needs to be fixed, what advice would you give to them? Somebody, if they feel called to change something, yet maybe they're feeling like, oh, this is too big. What advice would you give them to help them get started?
For me, there's two things that I would say. The first one is, we have a diminished sense of what we're capable of. So I always suggest baby steps. Like for me, this is all about baby steps to success. I'm a grieving mom. I can't take leaps. I need to baby step it all the way. So baby steps to success, like look at what you can do. Where's your sphere of impact? Who do you know? Who can you reach out to? What little change can you make? Because there is that butterfly effect, right? We know that little thing we do here ripples, and in ways we will never understand and we will never know. So take those baby steps. Don't be held back by the bigness of your vision. And the other thing that's been really effective for me is, growth and learning about how to do this through projects. So what's the first project you can do? And then take baby steps towards that, because that project will lead to the next one. It just feels inevitable. If you're on a mission, if you see something that's not working the way you feel is right, and you can work from your integrity and your love to try to create change, that project will lead to the next one. It will lead to the next person that needs to hear you. It will lead to the next opportunity. And you just keep taking those baby steps. Just baby step it.
Great advice. Thank you for
My
sharing.
advice is very similar.
Yay!
I would say little bits at a time. Like, how are you going to
Yeah.
eat an elephant? You're going to eat it one bite at a time. So one step, one bite. This is what I can do today. This is what I can do in the next month. And the more bites you take, again, the bigger ripple effect that it'll have. The more people that you come in contact with. And the hardest step is that first one.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I knew people needed help and support in grief. And I knew as a society, we needed to change the way we address that. And it's so cool because the more I do this work and the more I go places and I talk to people, the more people I find that are doing the same thing. And it's so beautiful to find that you're probably not alone in your vision. It's been envisioned to other people because it is so big and because it is so giant. But your take on it is going to be different than somebody else's. And so take that first step, start. Do imperfect action. So a mentor that I have always talks about imperfect action. Just do the thing. And then the more you do the thing, the better you'll get at doing the thing. And you'll be like, oh, well, I did that and it went like this. And now I need to, if I do it this way, then that's going to be even better. But if you don't start, then it's never going to happen.
Right. I love that imperfect action. And I think it's Mel Robbins talks about the hesitation habit. If you get the urge to do something, act on it before you have time to talk yourself out of it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that makes perfect sense.
And I think too, just riffing off of what Paige said, I think a lot of the time, especially with these big visions and these big ideas that we have, the kind of opposite of like start and you'll find your people is you see other people doing it and you feel like you don't have anything to contribute. But we all bring our unique magic, right? We all bring our unique set of experiences and learnings and growth and struggle and whatever it is. And the more we can get together, like the fact that you have two of us today instead of one of us just amplifies the conversation. And it lets people know even more that they're not alone, even more that people care about grief, even more that this is something you can make a difference in. And if grief is not your thing, if that's not what you're called to do, find what you're called to do and do that. And you will find the people working on it. It's amazing, as you said, Paige, how they just like come out of the woodwork. It's like that red car effect when you buy that red car because you've never seen one and then all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. I know so many people who are working in grief, and I'm sure you must too, Paige. And sadly, and now I know so many people who've lost, especially young men, to deaths by suicide. So this is not a club I ever wanted to belong to, but things happen to us in our life. And then, we have choices to make. And, your passion likely also comes from a lived experience. And that gives you unique magic that we all need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Suzanne, what do you think your magic is?
I think my magic is a combination of skills and resources that I have accumulated, for my 55 years. And so my magic is an ability to synthesize ideas and hold consciousness and curiosity together. That became my mantra in those very early days. I just knew I needed to be conscious and curious. And how do I do that in the, when the consciousness is about this is awful and I'm going to sob on the couch, and the curiosity is how do I breathe, right? That's the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it leads you to bigger visions and bigger ideas. So that ability to help other people find their own way, whether I'm working with an individual griever or a company that wants to shift culture, that's the thing. Like, what do I know? What's the unique piece of something that I learned unrelated to grief, perhaps? Like, so many of the skills I've used, I didn't learn as a griever. I learned them as a person, walking through a life, trying to be on a growth path and be as good a human as I could be. But then they all kind of synthesize somehow. And so for me, that's that magic. I can hold your grief in a way that feels light. I have that reflected to me all the time, that I can talk about this heavy, heavy subject
Mhm.
in a way that doesn't feel heavy. And so that's what I bring to the
Mhm.
table.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Paige? What do you think your magic is?
The ability to like hold space
Mhm.
for people who are in the mess and allow them to just be in the mess in that space. So I'm helping hold the space with them and for them, but they're doing the work themselves.
Yeah, that is a rare gift. It's that, yeah, as I think most of us have like a caregiver part, and as we talked about before, when we see someone in their mess, but allowing them to just to be there and to do the work that they need to do
Mhm.
is so important.
Yeah. And to be able to hold their hand and walk with them in it.
Yeah, it's like to be a companion. It's like grief
Yeah.
companioning somehow with our different,
Ew, I like
approaches,
that.
right? But we're your
Yeah.
companion. Like, I'm not here to fix it. I can't fix it.
No. It's
And
not going
I
to be
can't do the work
fixed.
for you. It's not fixable. Well, first of all, nothing's broken. We could have that whole
Right.
debate, right?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's not broken. It
I am
doesn't
not
need
broken. I do
fixed.
not feel fixing. I do not need
Right.
fixing.
It
But
just
it's that sense
is.
that you can walk alongside,
Mhm.
right? And that's what grievers need more than anything, is just people who can show up and walk alongside and help carry that burden when it's really heavy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know, Paige, I think you mentioned that you're launching a project in the fall, did you say?
Summer.
Summer. Can you tell us more about that and any other programs that you want people to know about upcoming?
Yeah, well, my grief yoga series, I don't know exactly when this is coming out, but I do 6-week series. So I do 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off. It gives me space to have a break, and to be able to give my full when we're on. And it also, as a griever, it gives you a break and it gives you space to synthesize what we've done and what we've talked about, and then come back with, oh, okay, this popped up, so let's work through around with this, as a part of this process. And so that starts the first week in May is my next series. I do a first Tuesday of every month a free virtual 30-minute meditation that gives just like lots of tools, and let's regulate and let's breathe. A lot of breathing, a teeny tiny, sometimes not always, bit of movement, and a little bit of sit time. So it's like a very introductory meditation. And then this summer, I think it's going to be launching mid-June. It's still a work in progress. It's honestly an idea with one module kind of thought about, and I haven't worked the other modules, but it's going to be a course that works with people in bringing tools on grieving, but also having conversations about grief and how to incorporate that into your life. It will include, no matter where you start in the program, because it'll be self-paced with a little bit of structure if you need the structure. That'll have biweekly live calls. So we'll do like some support group type calls where I'll break people into breakout rooms and they can just have conversations and be with each other. Because one of the things I've found in my work is that sometimes grievers just need to be with other grievers. And we don't necessarily need to talk about our grief, but we just need to be with people who kind of get what we've experienced. Maybe we're talking about this other aspect of our life that was impacted by our grief in an indirect way. Maybe we don't necessarily need to talk about our grief and those experiences. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And so that is coming this summer.
Nice. And if someone wanted to take part in any of those programs, how could they get in touch with you?
They can get me through social media. Everything is Tulsi Rose Yoga. I'm actually in the process of a shift. Tulsi Rose will still exist, but there's a broader business entity that is coming into fruition, and that is going to be called Soul Sanctuary, but nothing is live yet for that. But right now it's Tulsi Rose Yoga. Tulsi is Tulsi. It's an herb called holy basil, and rose also. They're both very supportive herbs. So if you do live classes with me, I always bring a tea of some sort to help support an herbal blend. So it's tulsiroseyoga.com. I'm at Tulsi Rose Yoga on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Thank you. How about you, Suzanne? What do you have coming up?
So yeah, thank you. This is such a great question. I love it. I'm also launching around a similar time. And what I'm putting together is what will be then an online version of the 6-step process that I do with companies and individuals, so that people who aren't connected to a group that's accessing it can come and form their own group. So that will be launching probably the beginning of June as well. So similar timing. And that will be like a 6-week, a step a week, and then some time for integration and kind of contemplation, and then, bring your questions back and let's break this down. I do almost all of my work online because it's just easier. We're so used to it now that then I can reach people all around the world. So that's easier. So that'll be an online offering as well. And then I have some spaces open for grievers who need a coach. I've had a few spots open up in my schedule, so available to take those. And then I'm always open to have conversations with business leaders, business owners, community groups that want to bring in, have a group of people come to learn together and create community where they kind of already know each other and have a shared language, because we can break through really quickly sometimes when there's that shared language already. So that's an ongoing intake for that. And everything I'm doing is on my website. That's the easiest place to find me, which is alivedexperience.com. And there's links there to all the social media places. So that's the easiest place to go, because it's easy to get there. And then you can click on all the links for whichever social media you're on, because I'm on all of them except Twitter at this point. So
nice. Well, that sounds like you have some exciting things coming up as well.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And, I would just like to thank both of you so much for being on this call or joining this meeting today. I know, so my passion is supporting visionary women, and I have had some of them tell me that they're struggling with grief. So I really wanted to provide a resource for them. So thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do. And for those of you that might be listening to this replay, I just invite you to check out my website is thewilddivine.us. And I have an awesome group on Facebook called Spiritually Anchored Visionary Women, where we can get together and support each other in making these big dreams that we have come true. So thanks again for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.